himself has been a pioneer in organizing many series of lectures, especially during these COVID times, so that we do not forget that those important provisions of law as well as the topics of interest. The topics presented here are of a varied series. So most of us would be practicing in some particular areas of practice, and we do not have this exposure of listening to such other eminent speakers practicing in different areas. So this has been one such platform which has enabled us all to gain valuable insight and knowledge into various topics of law. And today, being the 22nd virtual knowledge series, the speaker for the day is Mr. Soham Panse. He is a practicing advocate at Bombay. And so once again, I welcome you all. And now I hand over the floor to Mr. Siddharth Fatale, who is the partner of Mr. Soham Panse, to introduce the speaker for this.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce Advocate Soham Panse. Soham actually comes from a family which has a very rich legal history and legacy. He himself is a third generation lawyer. His grandfather, late Mr. Govindrao Bhaskarrao Panse, was one of the eminent advocates in Pune city. And he was also a government leader in Baramati before that. His father, Anandrao Panse, is still an advocate who is practicing and has an experience of more than 48 years. Soham himself has started this practice in 2014 and has a good amount of experience in litigation which involves property dispute, specific performance of contract, matrimonial litigation, cooperative societies litigation, and just to name a few of them. His desire is to practice before the Honorable Supreme Court in the field of taxation law, and I hope he does that. And with all the best for Soham, I ask him to please start the lecture.
Over to Soham.
Thank you, sir, for introducing me, and thanks a lot, Siddharth, for that introduction. And thanks a lot, everyone here, for giving me this opportunity. This is the second time which I'm presenting before this August gathering, and it gives me immense pleasure and a sense of pride to present before you whatever limited knowledge I have on the topics which earlier also had taken, and this also. Like we were discussing in the open session before the start of presentation, that this is by far the biggest order in CPC, and it is a humongous topic. So once again, I would just like to mention that whatever I have tried to do in this PPT is to consolidate the present order in a way that it is wherein I have touched based on all the aspects or all the chapters of Order 21, and in that in the due course of this session as it goes ahead, I will be focusing on the important aspects or important provisions in regards to the rules rather, which have been dealt with one after the. So with this, I would like to move on. So for that, what is important here is what is a definition of an decree and definition of an order when it actually we need to decide when we have to deal with Order 21, because Order 21 per se says that it is execution of decree and order. So for that, if we have to go, it says that whereas the decree is defined as per section 2.2 of the Code of Civil Procedure, and whereas that definition clause further under section 2.14, it deals with the definition of order. So more importantly, if we go by it, now let me just go ahead with my slides to show that what are the important contents of a decree. So if I just I'll just read the definition of decree as per the CPC, and then we come to the components of what a decree is. So decree means a formal expression of an adjudication which, so far as regards the court expressing it, conclusively determines the rights of the parties with regard to all or any of the matters in controversy in a suit, and may be either preliminary or final. It shall be deemed to include the rejection of plaint and determines the questions within section 144, but shall not include So there are two things which it shall not include, but just now we'll have to pause and we'll have to see what is it. So it is a formal expression. So formal expression means it is something which is an expression, or it is an order, authoritative order given by the court. And what is it? It is an adjudication by the court. So it is after the court goes through the entire details of the matter, entire details, like entire dispute which is in front of it, and also with the plaint which has been filed by the plaintiff, the written statement which has been filed by the defendants, and wherein the defendants have raised their defenses, and any other things if at all, and most importantly the evidence which has been laid out. So it is an adjudication by the court on all these three aspects, and thereafter the court comes to and determine conclusive determination. So it is a conclusion by the court, that is it is a determination which is conclusive in nature, and it has been finalized. So it is nothing been left by the court for an ambiguity per se, and it determines the rights of the parties. So what is it? So when the court actually, like, we'll have to go to this in regards to the framing of issues for that for this one brief moment, as none of these orders can be dealt with in isolation. So if we go to order 14 that deals with the framing of issues of CPC, so what happens is when we deal with that, the court frames an issues depending upon the case put up by the plaintiff and the defenses raised by the defendants in that written statement. So when that is done, there are issues which are being framed by the court. So that issues determine the right of the parties, and therefore the decree is an judgment which comes on all the issues or the majority of issues. So that is why the decree forms a conclusive expression. It is a conclusive determination, and more importantly, it can be a preliminary decree or a final decree, which is the last component which I'd like to harp on. That is, it can be either something which is given at the first instance by the court, and later on it has to be finalized. Like when it is a partition suit, the decree which comes first is the preliminary decree, and when the preliminary decree is sent to the execution, what happens later on is the final decree. And so order 21 has a very big ambit, and order 21, if I may I'll show it in the next slide also, that what are the salient features of order 21, or how order 21 is an all-inclusive, all-encompassed code in itself, which deals with each and every aspect which may arise in furtherance of this provision. So moving further, so what is this? Is what an decree is, but what is an order? So as per section 2 subsection 14, it is crystal clear, and it deals with this, that whatever is not a decree is an order. So order, I'll just go through the brief definition of section 2, what is meant by order. Yeah, so order means a formal expression of any decision of a civil court which is not a decree. So now we'll have to pause here, and we'll also have to give a thought in a brief moment. So what is an order? So whatever is not an decree is definitely an order, but when an order also means a formal expression which has been encompassed in it, and which is also done with the adjudication of the court. So many a times we as lawyers file various miscellaneous applications before the court. One of them can be for an maybe application of probate, application for letters of administration, or even while filing a civil suit for a partition, we file a stay application. So all these things when we file, and there is an order which is passed on that, it is, even though it is a formal expression, it is not an conclusive determination of the rights and parties. And that is where the conclusive determination aspect distinguishes decree from an order. And therefore an order is something which may be a formal expression, but it is not conclusive. So any order which has been passed under order 39, which deals with injunctions, or it may be an interlocutory order, it may be an order under 38 for the attachment, and all these orders are orders as per the ambit of section 2 subsection 14 of the Code of Civil Procedure. Now I would like to move on the salient features of order 21. So as I would like to reiterate here from what I had stated earlier, that it is a self-contained code within itself, because right from order rule 1 to rule 106 of order 21, there are various rules which deal with various legal scenarios which may arise at the time of the execution of orders as well as decrees, and they have been mentioned in depth, in detail, which are applicable in various scenarios, and that is why it is a self-contained code within itself. Then as I have already mentioned while discussing the above mentioned salient feature also, that there is a procedure which is laid down for the every scenario. Then it is divided into 13 chapters or parts. If it is not, they have not been mentioned as parts if you see the bare act of CPC, but it has been divided into 13 parts which deal with various aspects, which I'm going to definitely touch base upon, because what I'm giving here is just the tip of the iceberg, because the entire order 13 runs in depth, and it would be actually a humongous session, and it would be like 2 hours 3 hours discussion. And as we had discussing with Magesh sir, that yes, this is definitely a part 1, and definitely I would like to again say that this is a limited interpretation of it as per my knowledge. So yes, as it is a procedural law, it can be interpreted as per the scenarios, as per the facts and circumstances, how things come and how these things go ahead. So moving further, it deals with different aspects. That is more important level. Just like to harp upon this, that there is a provision in order 21 which deal with sale generally as a part of execution of an order. And moving further, the next two rules in that, or next two parts in that, deal with the sale of movable properties and also sale of immovable properties. So this is another aspect of order 21. And moving further, as I have already mentioned, that it is the longest order in the entire CPC, right from rule 1 to rule 106. So now moving further, what are the chapter and parts of order 21? So the first chapter, that is rules 1 and 2 of the CPC, deal with the payment under decree. Before moving further, I would like to just mention here that as we have already gone through the definition of decree, that what is a decree and what does it encompasses. But there is one more important thing that we have to see, that I had said that just hold on for a moment. Like I had not covered this point, that what does it does not it include. So what does a definition of decree does not include is also important to see when we have to see the applicability of order 21 for those orders, or for those orders which have been passed by the court at that point of time. So order 21, section 2.2 of the Code of Civil Procedure, that is decree, does not encompass the following two things. That is appeal as an appeal from an order. So wherever there is an appeal from an order which is provided, that is as per order 40. I'll just refer it in a moment, because there are two orders again, which are again a self-contained code within itself, which deal about the appeal from decrees and appeal from orders. So if we have to think about that, yes, so the appeal from original decrees is order 41. So whatever orders or decrees are there which can be appealed have to be appealed as per the procedures of order 41 of CPC. And if it is an appeal from an order, it is order 43. So specifically a decree is something which does not include when an appeal from an order is possible. So an appeal where an appeal from an order is not possible in view of order 43, that does not become a decree, and that cannot be construed as a decree as per the definition under section 2.2 of the Code of Civil Procedure. And the second important aspect which I will like to harp upon is that then order of a dismissal for default. So this is very important to see, that whenever a suit is dismissed for default, it does not operate as a decree, but it is an order for which the course of action or the course of appeal or the course of taking in cognizance of it in the higher courts has been defined in a different provision altogether, but it does not constitute to a decree under section 2.2 again of CPC. So now coming to the important aspect, that is payment under decree, that is rules 1 and 2. So both the rules, that is 1 and 2, have been explained in sufficient detail by the makers of the by the makers as well as people who have drafted the Code of Civil Procedure, and that procedure has been laid down, which is very much easy enough to understand and that can be relied upon. But here there is an important aspect which we have to see as per Order 21 Rule 1, and that aspect is many times we as lawyers, when we file money recovery suits or we file suits based on the negotiable instruments or simple money suits for that matter for the recovery of amounts. So what happens is we tend to we may tend to miss out on this aspect, that the quantum of interest is cannot be avoided unless and until it is pleaded or mentioned in the judgment. So this is a very important aspect as per the payment under a decree. So if I make a application or if I file a suit for a recovery of amount, and if I have not mentioned that I want an interest at a rate of so and so, or at least I have not mentioned the interest, then it is not bounded upon the court who is executing that decree under Order 21 Rule 1 to grant me the interest. So for that, it is very much necessary that the quantum of interest has to be mentioned either in the plaint or either like in the plaint of or the pleading in general. Not only plaint but in the pleading in general, because we'll come to know here that how it is applicable to both the matters, like how it is applicable to the plaint as well as the written statement in furtherance as I go ahead. But it is also important that yes, it is the interest has to be pleaded specifically, then only it can be awarded, or else the amount of interest or the quantum of interest has to be specifically mentioned by the court who has passed the decree. So that is why it is important, and in this regard I would like to make a mention of the case law, which is a landmark judgment of the Supreme Court in this regard. I would be later on mentioning that in my presentation, like I'll be sharing those case details also. That is State of Punjab versus Krishna Dayal Sharma. The citation is 2011 3 SCC Civil 653. This is a landmark judgment which has dealt with the interest component, and that the interest component cannot be awarded unless and until it is pleaded or mentioned in the judgment. So now moving further, it is about the courts executing the decrees that has been mentioned in the rules 3 to 9. So here again the important aspect which we have to see, that is when there are multiple properties and the decree is for the handing over the possession of the properties which are situated at multiple locations. So which court has the jurisdiction to deal with the where the lands are situated under more than one jurisdictions? So for here, I would like to just stop and give an example. So for example, there is a suit of partition which has been filed in the case of say for example Pune, and the lands are situated in Pune, Mumbai, Aurangabad, and other 2-3 cities. So it can be anywhere in these 3 jurisdictions. Any of these jurisdictions can have the court have the jurisdiction to execute that decree. So that way, under Order 21 Rule 3, where a land is situated in more than one jurisdiction, it is up to the parties to decide where they want to go ahead and choose for the execution of that decree. So moving further, this also talks about the transfer of to court of small causes. So it specifically says that where the value of the plaint set forth, it does not exceed 2,000 rupees. So wherever the claim which has been set out by the plaintiff is less than 2,000 rupees, it can be sent to the small causes court for execution, and it can be sent to presidency or provincial small causes court where there are no other small causes court, and this comes into existence only where the presidency small causes courts like the cities of Calcutta, Madras and Bombay. So that is one more important aspect which we have to see. Then order 5 deals with what are the modes of transfer and how the transfer can be effected when a decree is being set from one court to other court for execution, and what is it, what are the essentials, procedures, or what are the essential provisions which have to be followed for the execution of decree. And moving further, there is another procedure which has been laid down specifically in Rule 6 that deals with the procedure when a decree is passed to another court for execution. So supposedly there is an A court which passes a decree in favor of the plaintiff, and that decree has to be now sent to some other court because that court is not going to execute the decree. Then there is a procedure, separate procedure, which has been laid down by the Code of Civil Procedure 1908, and therefore it has to be considered. Then moving further, another important aspect is that as per Order 22 Rule 7, it says that the court receiving the copies of decrees and other documents along with it have to file the same without the proof. So when there are documents which have been received by the other court in general at this point for filing of decree, if it is received from any other court, then it does not require any proof. It has to be filed as it is. So that is an important aspect of it. Then the court to which a decree or order is sent by the execution of decree or order by the court to which it is sent. So order 8 specifically deals in this regard, that how the court to which has received the decree from any other court, how does it go about the execution of it. And it says execution by the High Court of decree transferred by another court. So wherever any decree has been sent by any other court, the procedure which has been laid down by the High Court.
Sir, your audio.
Extensively in Rules 10 to Rules 23 of the Code of Civil Procedure. Now, here I would like to just mention in detail, that is an application for execution. So application for execution, to whom it has to be made, how it has to be made, that has already been mentioned. And the Rule 10 says that who makes an application for execution, and who the person that is the judgment dater and decree holder. So any person who is a decree holder and who has been awarded the decree in favor, he can go ahead and make sure that that decree is being executed. So he can prefer an application for the execution of decree. So that is one thing. And moving further, there are two modes which have been prescribed for the application for execution. That is Rule 11. So Rule 11(1), Sub-Rule 1 talks about an oral application by which an oral application can be moved by the decree holder for the execution of decree, whereas the Sub-Rule 2 talks about the written application for the execution of the decree. And when you are making a written application, all the important aspects that what needs to be made at the time of making a written application have been mentioned. So I'd like to just go through it in brief about that. So it talks about the number of the suit in which the decree has been passed. It talks about the names of the parties which have been which are there. That is the name of the decree holder and the judgment dater. Then it is the date of the decree. That is when the decree was passed by the honorable court, which the judgment dater wants to execute. Then there has to be a specific mention where any appeal has been preferred from the decree. So that has also to be made. Then there is, if there is any payment which is made or made by the judgment dater before the decree has been, before an application is made for the execution. Then whether any previous applications for execution have been made. So this is very important to see that the code itself has given us a laid down a very stringent procedure, and there is a very fixed procedure how we have to go ahead with it. So if at all a previous application for execution has been made, we have to go ahead with it, that whether the application is made or not made, that is something which we have to see. Then when that application is made, we have to also give the date when the previous applications were made for the execution of those decrees. Then, if the amount, whether there is a cost which is awarded, so that has to be also specifically mentioned. Then the name against whom the execution of decree is sought, that is again there. Then the mode in which the court is required to do. So there are various modes under which the court can go ahead and execute the decree. So what are the modes which have been dealt with, or what are the modes for the execution of decree have been also mentioned. That is in the further chapter which is there, but the application which we are making in writing specifically calls upon the decree holder to state a mode of execution by which he wants the court to execute the decree which has been passed in his favor, which is very important to say. Then moving further, there are other rules also which go up to 23, but due to the paucity of time I won't be touching on that, but I would be harping upon three major aspects of the application for execution. One of them is application for execution of a joint decree. So when there are more this will mostly arise in case of partition suits, wherein it is like there are more than one plaintiffs who have filed a suit, and therefore they have to go ahead with it and they have to go for the execution of decree. So when there are more than two or three plaintiffs, there can be always an application for joint decree can be made by the either of plaintiffs coming together and making an application for execution. And the mode of making such an application has been prescribed under Rule 15 of the code itself. Then where the execution for application for execution by transferee of a decree. So when a decree is transferred from one court to another, and there is a transfer of decree which takes place, then what is the mode of execution for transferring of that decree has also been mentioned in the Rule 16 of the Code of Civil Procedure. And what is the procedure when an application for transfer of decree has been received by the Honorable Court? How does the Honorable Court deal with the application which has been received under the provisions of Order 21 Rule 16 are dealt with in Order 21 Rule 17. So moving further, there is also of the execution of cross decrees, which is very much important for the application of execution. So what are cross decrees? I would like to just pause here and mention in this regard that what are cross decrees. So as we would have, as I was stating earlier, that regards to pleadings, when we say it contains not only the plaint, but it also contains the written statement. So here, when we say it is the cross decrees, that means when there is a money suit or a recovery suit which has been filed for money, then there can be also a counter claim in respect of that, which may be filed by the defendants in this regard. So that is why there may come a chance wherein the court can come up with this, that okay, fine, if a suit has been filed by X against the Y, the court comes to a conclusion that yes, X owes to Mr. Y rupees 10 lakhs, and that is so X files a suit to sorry, I rephrase the example. X files to X files a suit against Mr. Y for the recovery of rupees 10 lakhs, and the court passes an order, yes, Mr. Y owes Mr. X rupees 10 lakhs. But subsequently, Mr. Y has also filed a counter claim, and whereby the court has passed a decree in the favor of Mr. Y also, that yes, Mr. Y also owes an amount of rupees 5 lakhs to Mr. X owes rupees 5 lakh rupees to Mr. Y. Now this becomes something as cross decrees. Now how do we go about the execution? So the court has itself, if you see in Order 18, it has said when the amount is same. So if both the parties owe each other the same amount or the same quantum, then there is no, the decree gets drawn up there entirely, and the satisfaction is entered upon when the two sums are equal. But when it becomes a challenge is this, when going back to our example, that Y owes X 10 lakhs, but X owes Y only 5 lakhs. So then X will go ahead and proceed for the execution of only 5 lakhs, which he has excess or which he needs to recover from Y. So that is how the execution of explained at length as per in the order order 18 itself, and order 19 deals with the cross claims. So as we have already seen, as per cross decrees, when there are cross claims also made by the either parties in form of counter claims or otherwise, then how they get executed have been mentioned in rule 19. So when in rule 19, it again is rule 18 itself, that when the amount of claims are exactly identical, then a satisfaction is drawn and the decree is executed without either of the parties making the payment. But when one party's claim is more than the other party's claim, then what has to be done is that the party who is having a more valued claim proceeds with the execution of that claim against the party from whom the claim is made. And rule 20 talks about the cross decrees and cross claims to mortgage suits. So very specific provision in regards to the mortgage suits have been enshrined in rule 20. Now I would like to just make more importantly, I'd like to make a note, that is order 21 rule 22. It talks about the notice to show cause to issue show cause against execution in certain cases. So this is a very crucial aspect, and I would like to just spend a couple of more minutes on this aspect. So it is in this case where a show cause notice is issued to the judgment debtor by the court when a decree holder moves to the court for the execution. And it is important to note that where the court will make where an application is made for the execution by the judgment decree holder for the execution, it is very important that the court can issue a show cause notice. When I'll just put this, when an application is made more than 2 years from the date of a decree. So when a decree is made, when a decree is passed and a notice of execution is being filed after 2 years for execution, the court will issue a show cause notice to the judgment debtor seeking that whether this decree is to be executed in our favor or not. So there is a show cause notice which is specifically issued if at all there is a lapse of 2 years. And now this brings me to another important aspect, that what is a limitation for the execution of decrees under the Limitation Act. So when a decree is passed as per the provisions of Limitation Act, the decree can be executed as which as the provisions have been laid down under the limitation. But more importantly, if it is after 2 years, that is after 2 years when the limitation is still in persistence, then the court will issue a show cause notice to the other side asking that whether the decree can be made executable against the judgment debtor. But here, as I said, we'll have to take one more minute and understand that this is a scenario, that is order 21 rule 22 and made after 2 years is a scenario which is applicable only, which is generally. So wherever there are no amendments which has been passed by the particular states in this regard, it will be 2 years from when an application is made after the passing of a decree. But as we are dealing, as this lecture is specifically, I am addressing my brothers and sisters from Madras. So I'd like to highlight then here a point, that is when it comes to specifically Madras and Pondicherry, it is that there is an amendment which has been carried on by the CPC, and there is a state amendment in this regard. And in sub-rule 1, the words 2 years shall be substituted for the words 1 year wherever they occur. So in this regard, for when we are dealing with the scenarios in Madras and Pondicherry, the 2 years time bar does not appear. The time bar is only 1 year, and after the 1 year, the show cause notice for the execution of decree when an application is made, it becomes mandatory and it is important. So to summarize it in detail, when we are saying it into when we are saying for the generally where there is no a state amendment, it is 2 years, and wherever there is a state amendment, the state amendment for Madras and Pondicherry per se, it is 1 year. So that is how the law is there, and the state amendment is technically there. Then moving further, another important aspect here is stay of an execution. That is, it takes of how the stay of an decree or an order which has been passed under order by the court can be stayed, that has been dealt with under order 26 to order 29. So all these there is specific mention that when the court may stay the execution. So wherever there is a decree which has been passed and the decree comes up before a court who has to execute it, the executing court also can stay the decree before, and that is the main aspect, that the court to whom the decree has come for execution can also stay its own decree, provided that a sufficient cause is shown by the party who is making an application for the stay of the. So that is a very important thing. And more importantly, if again in this regard, there is if an appeal has been filed, or there is some other cognizance which has been taken by the party or the judgment dater who has been affected by the decree, and if he proves to the satisfaction of the court, then as per Rule 26, then the court can proceed with the staying of the decree. And more importantly, when there is a decree which has to be stayed, then there are certain conditions, or there are certain conditions which have been imposed upon the judgment dater, whereby the execution can be stayed, and those conditions have been mentioned in detail, so that if there is a money decree in favor of the decree holder which has been come for execution, and the judgment dater makes an application for stay, the court may impose a condition that okay, fine, we will stay this decree provided you pay 30%, 40%, but that is at the discretion of the court. It is not a straitjacket formula which is applied. It depends upon the case to case that how the decree has to be passed, decree has to be stayed, and the other things. Then, as I was saying, that modes of execution. So how do we go ahead with the modes of execution? So the modes of execution have been mentioned in detail in the next chapter, that deals with from rules 30 to rules 36. So the rules 30, rule 30 of order 21 deals with the decree of payment of money. So it's the order 21 rule 30 deals specifically with the monetary decree. Then moving further, we have to come to rule 31, which deals with specific movable properties. So wherever a decree is of specific movable property, what are the modes of execution of that decree have been mentioned upon that, and how that the decree has to be executed, and how the possession of the movable property has to be handed over to the decree holder or the purchaser out of the said decree from the judgment dater has been mentioned in detail. Then moving further, it also talks order 21 rule 32 deals with a specific scenario, that is specific performance in the or of an injunction order. So wherever an order has been passed for the restitution of conjugal rights or an injunction, what are the modes in which the order has to be executed has been specifically mentioned in order 21 rule 32 sub rule 1 and sub rule 2. And if the party who is in default of those orders, what are the procedures which the party can take, the party who is aggrieved by the default of the other party can take, have been mentioned. And I would like to just highlight here the sub rule 4, which says that where a judgment dater has obeyed the decree and paid all the cost of the executing, same which bound to pay, whereas it is end of 6. So if an attachment is made, this order specifically talks that there is a 6 months period or 6 months breathing period which has been given for clearing that default. But if that default has not been cured, then what are the further actions which are there for the mode of execution? So that is how the order 32 deals with. And the 33 more particularly deals with the discretion of the court, that is at the time of execution of the decree of conjugal rights. So it is very important for the people, like when we deal with matrimonial matters and we file an application under section 9 of Hindu Marriage Act, which is for the restitution of conjugal rights, that if the restitution does not take place, how do we go ahead with it, and how do we go for the modes of execution? So that has been specifically mentioned in Rule 33 of the Act. And the Rule 34 and 35 34 deals with when an execution is relating to a document, and 35 deals with decree of immovable property, which has to be put in possession, and wherein the decree holder has to be put in the possession of the immovable property from the judgment dater in that regard. And 36 is again a very specific provision which contains the act, which contains a procedure in regards, more importantly, when the land, the property has been given on tenanted basis, or where the property has been in occupation of the tenant or a licensee. Now moving further, that is the arrest and detention in civil prison. So when we are dealing with the modes of execution, the another aspect which comes here is when that we do not, the judgment dater do not adhere to the provisions of execution or try to create any hindrances in execution of the decree. What are the remedies which are available to the decree holders? So the provisions of arrest and detention in the civil prison, which have been contemplated in detail from 37 to 40, and they have to be construed as how we have to go ahead, and what are the procedures, that whether a warrant can be issued to a judgment dater, and how the judgment dater can be brought about. Then what is the subsistence allowance which has to be paid to the person who's defaulting it, and in this regard. And more importantly, I would like to harp on Order 39, which talks about the subsistence allowance. So it says, the Order 39 Rule 1, I would like to quote here, that no judgment dater shall be arrested in the execution of decree unless the decree holder pays to the court into such sum it thinks sufficient for the subsistence of judgment dater from the time of his arrest until he can be brought before the court. So it is very important to understand that in this regard, whenever we are going for the arrest or detention of the judgment dater in the court, it is very necessary that the decree holder or the person in whose favor the decree is has to pay an allowance to the court which is subsistent enough for the person who for the judgment dater to subsist in the civil prison, and that allowance has been paid, then only an order of arrest or a detention can be passed. Now, the moving further, that is the attachment of property or attachment of property. So that is something which has been dealt with in detail from Order 41 to Rule 57. And in this regard, I would like to just harp upon one important aspect, that is Order 41 of CPC, which talks about examination of the judgment dater as to his property. So I would like to make a mention here that many times what happens is, once we get a money decree in our favor or we get any kind of a decree, what happens is we go for the execution. But most of the times our clients are not aware that I have encountered this problem specifically while dealing with one of my matters, which is pending before the court of Baramati, that my client was not aware of the property which the judgment dater has. And she was like, how do we execute a decree? But Order 41, I feel, is an answer here. It talks about where a decree is for the payment of money, the decree holder may apply to the court that for an order that a judgment dater or where a judgment dater is a corporation, any person thereof or any other person, be orally examined as to whether any debts, whether any or what debts are owing to the judgment dater, and what is the property of the judgment dater. So this is very much essential that it can be of assistance to us while we are executing the decrees, that we can always make this application under order 21 rule 41 and call upon the other side to produce its record as to property, and that record has to be produced on the affidavit per se. And in this regard, it is also the books of the accounts of the judgment daters can be also called upon by the court, wherein the party can wherein the attachment of the property can become very much easy, and it can be very much essential, and the ends of the justice can be met. So because the ultimate end of getting the decree executed is meeting the ends of justice. So moving further, I would like to just quickly touch base upon, because looking at the time.
1 second, Soham, how
Yes.
much time will be taking for the more?
5 to 10 minutes more, sir.
Okay,
Just one more slide to go.
Thanks.
Yeah. So thanks a lot, Ravi sir, for that reminder. So I'll just be touch basing upon those two, the touch base aspect of it. So in the attachment of property, there have been specifically three to four specific provisions which have been mentioned. That is Order 21 Rule 49 deals with an attachment of the property, which is a partnership property. So what are the modes in which a partnership property can be attached? Then Order 50 deals with when a decree is against a firm. So when a decree has been passed against the firm, what are the execution procedure which has to be followed? Then what is an attachment procedure which has to be followed in regards to the attachment of immovable property? So in case it is a land or a bungalow of any person, then what are the procedures which have to be followed for the attachment of immovable properties? And more importantly, how this attachment needs to be removed. So if an attachment is done and the judgment dater later on comes to the court and satisfies the court that yes, he has satisfied all the obligations and he has paid all the amount which is due to the decree holder, then how this attachment needs to be removed has been given in a step-by-step procedural aspect as per Order 55 of the Order 21 itself. Then moving further, I would like to just harp upon the aspect that is adjudication of claims and objections that has been specifically mentioned in Rule 58 to 63. So I would like to just mention here that Rules 58 to 63 have been brought about by way of amendment. So these rules were not in existence. So this chapter was not in existence till 1st of February 1977. So this has been an amendment which has been brought in the Code of Civil Procedure, and the order Rules 58 to 63 of Order 21 have been mentioned as per the amendment which has been carried on in 1976, and that amendment has taken effect since 1st of February 1977. So this is how, so the main motive or the main reason why this amendment came into existence was that it talks about the adjudication of claims and objections. So in order to give a fair chance to the judgment daters also, who have been against whom the decree has been passed, and if there is a genuine case which is being brought up by the judgment dater, it would be necessary to take as consideration of that aspect, and that is why Section 58 to 63 are of a paramount importance in regard to safeguard the interest of the judgment daters. And that is why, with the view of this, the lawmakers thought it necessary to get this this amendment in effect. Now moving further, that is sale generally, that talks about from Rule 64 to 73. So this talks about the sale aspect and how the Order 20 decrees or the orders have to be executed as per Order 21. So that has been mentioned more particularly, that is a generalized sale and how does it take place, and that has been mentioned in Order 73. But moving further, as I've already stated that this is a self-contained code, and I would like to reiterate here that why it is a self-contained code, because it has taken in existence the most minutest of the minute details. So order, even the previous chapter, which deals from section 64, I'll just go back to previous slide. That is rule 64 to 73. It talks about sale generally. So what are the provisions in regard to the sale? But specific provisions what are in regards to the sale of movable properties have been dealt with from rules 74 to 81 of this act. And more importantly, what are the provisions in regards to the immovable property, that is how does the sale of immovable property take place, have been dealt with from rules 82 to 96. So that is why each and every important aspect and how the movable property and immovable property needs to be sold at the time of execution of the order and decree have been mentioned in the code itself, and thus we don't have to go to any other law, or we don't have to refer to any other statute. The procedures have been mentioned which need to be followed for the sale of movable property or immovable property for the execution of the orders under in this regard. And more importantly, going to the last part here, that is resistance to the delivery of possession to decree holder or purchaser. So why it is decree holder or purchaser? So here I would like to just touch base upon this aspect, that whenever a decree has to be executed, normally what happens is there is a sale also can be done. When we have
Sir, your audio?
So seems some network connectivity is a failure.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, now last thing we have not heard.
Yes, sir.
Last
I'll go.
one line.
Yes, I'll go back to it again.
Repeat.
Yes. So I'd like to make a mention brief here about resistance to delivery of possession to decree holder and or purchaser. So why is it a decree holder or purchaser? So as we have already seen above, that there are provisions in regard to the sale, and there are provisions in regard to the sale of movable as well as immovable properties. So in this regard, there is a specific provision of there is a specific rule which deal with the auction sale of the property, which is for which can be sold to any other third person, and the amount which is recovered from that can be given to the decree holder in satisfaction of the decree amount. So in that regard, when that property is sold, even the decree holder may be satisfied for his amount. But what about the purchaser who has bought that property? How does the purchaser get a possession of that property from the judgment debtor? So there are specific rules which have been mentioned, and those rules have been mentioned from rules 97 to rules 106 of the act of this code itself. But here again, I would like to just briefly mention about an important rule, which is rule 102 of order 21, which says that this rules not applicable to a transferee pendenti right. So what does this rule mean? This rule is very clear that the rule 98 and 100 shall apply to the nothing in rules 98 and 100. So this rule, the rules which have been specifically mentioned in rule 98 and 100 about the transferring to a purchaser or a decree holder shall not be applicable when the transfer is being made during the during the pendency of the suit. So when a suit has been instituted and thereafter a transfer is being made, and a decree is passed subsequently in that suit, then the order 102 says that specifically rules 98 and rules 100 will not apply in this regard. So as I've said that I've just tried to summarize these details in general, and this is like by this I would like come to an end of the presentation which I've prepared. So this is just a brief overview of order 21 and what are the important aspects, and I've tried to highlight the various important rules which we as lawyers require in the kind of practice and which are more important for getting the practical solutions in the court of law and the procedures which have been laid down for it. So with this, I hand over to V sir for the question and answer session. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, it was very interesting, and I think furthermore time required for this, I think so. Go for impression. To start with, I think Bhaskar Keshavamurthy.
Yes. Sir, once again I introduce myself. I am K. Bhaskar, advocate. First of all, thanks to Ravi Meenakshi Sundaram who given opportunity to learn in various legal aspects and various learned advocates from the legal profession. And now thanks to Mr. Soham Panse, who delivered today speeches very well on the execution proceedings. As already you say, the Order 21, which is more, the rules is 1 to 106 is the largest rules in the CPC, and you cover all the rules, whichever extent the time available, and you very excellently given the provisions with the relevant movables and attachment and also sale. I thank you for giving lecture today on behalf of Madras Presidency Lawyers Forum. And I only one question.
Yes, sir.
I would like to, yes. If in the disobedience of the decree,
yes,
committed by a female, whether we can move for execution proceedings against for civil prison, for arrest and civil prison.
Sir, there is no such difference when it comes to the arrest, like where it is made by a female or a male. So you can definitely ahead with it, and there are modes of execution which have been prescribed. And I specifically mentioned that as per Rule 49, which says about the subsistence allowance. So it is very much important that you pay about this thing about the subsistence allowance has to be paid. That is a prerequisite for going for the detention in civil prison.
Thank you.
Yes. Request Anita. You have to give your impression.
Well, the lecture was very informative. Soham has really taken in a lot of efforts to explain each and every aspect of execution of decrees, and it being a very lengthy subject, yes, he did wrap through it, but anyway, it was a good explanation and a very good lecture. Thank you, Soham, for explaining the execution process in detail.
Hello, P. Kumar. Jay Gopal.
Yes. Can I talk now?
Yeah.
Soham, I am Parani Kumar speaking to you.
Yeah.
It was a very nice
sir.
session. What a flow. Very good flow. Very amazing. Okay. Very good, sir.
May I now request Sir Prakash to give the impression, please.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. The Order 21 is a very lengthy session, and Brother Soham has taken much pains to concise for the short span of 1 hour. And regarding the slides presented by him in the sessions, it was very self-explanatory, and he has taken much concentration and for preparing those slides. Thank you, Soham, for preparing such slides. And no wonder it's a very lengthy section to be discussed. And I have taken much pain for giving out the importance aspects of Order 21. Yeah, really impressive. Thank you, Soham, for such a wonderful session, and look forward for more such sessions from your side. All the best.
More than obliged, sir.
After vote of thanks, please. Jayanti Shah.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose this vote of thanks. First of all, I thank you all for making this session as a resounding success. First and foremost, I would like to thank Mr. Soham, Speaker of the day, who has obliged to be our speaker. My heartfelt thanks to all of you, and all the guests who have logged in and sharing this valuable inputs. Last but not least, I thank all my member friends for making this meet a great success. Thank you.